Welcome everyone. Today we have Rachel Mckenzie joining us. Rachel is a survivor of ritual abuse and mind control. She was born into a generational family and was able to escape, find deliverance and healing by God's grace. She is the incredible author of 2 books, The Truth Leaks, A Life Illuminated Through Poetic Writing, and Becoming Rachel in the Clash of Two Kingdoms. And I wanted to share just a little from Becoming Rachel that really describes beautifully Rachel's journey with the Holy Spirit, the miraculous power of God to set us free and heal these unspeakable traumas and soul wounds. So Rachel writes, Satan has devised a way to bring as much hell and destruction to earth as he can, especially to those who belong to the kingdom of God. He does this through the underbelly of the occult realm, and he uses people who look a lot like me. These people are trained to be an army. The spiritual forces in the kingdom of darkness operate through human vessels, just as the Holy Spirit moves through those of us who believe in Jesus. But the enemy's army looks very different. He creates robots out of broken humans. He raises up deceivers out of innocent ones who've been lied to. People just like me can become weapons for the purposes of evil through assignments for the New World Order and a lot of demonic influence. But the true reality is one of absolute and final truth. The kingdom of darkness does not win. If you belong to Jesus, then the kingdom of darkness cannot keep you. And this is why it could not hold me for very long. And if you don't yet belong to Jesus but want to, then the darkness will have to give you up. It cannot keep what it doesn't own. God made every living being, every living thing that belongs to him first. This is the unshakable hope that is available to everyone. This hope kept me alive until Jesus could rescue me. It is a hope that is stronger than pain, holds tighter than fear, and is eternal even after death. This hope can never die. I have absolutely loved reading Rachel's book, and I'm so thrilled to have her join us today and share some of her experiences. And yeah, it's so wonderful to have you here, Rachel. Welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Oh. Yeah, I've been really guided in prayer over the last weeks, that God, really wants us to focus on him. It's so easy when we're discussing, the horrors of the enemy's kingdom, and I know that we have to bring exposure to those as well, to get caught up in, talking about all of the tools of the enemy and very easily miss, the most important thing, which is the solutions. And, God has really had it on my heart, because he's guided me so much throughout my own healing journey over the past 2 years since remembering, that what really matters is that we keep our focus on Jesus and the very real solutions and true healing of prayer and deliverance, as well as building communities of support for survivors and really allowing the gifts we have that we each have to bless each other. So I've been very deep in prayer over the last few weeks, just asking God which stories are important, like what do I need to bring forward, for our community and for other survivors out there that haven't even found us yet, to give them the keys to heal. And he's really brought some phenomenal people into my life in the last few weeks, and Rachel is one of them. So I'm so looking forward to sharing just some of her story today. Which is not about, where she come from. It's really about her journey out of that enemy's kingdom and into God's kingdom, which is, I believe, what we're all searching for, so desperately. And, absolutely, I can put my hand up to this, looking for it in the wrong places. So welcome, Rachel. And I would love to start today, just with a bit of a look into, what your childhood was like growing up. I know in your book you describe so eloquently, Rachel's a brilliant writer, as you would have heard from the little paragraphs that I've just shared. But, she really describes beautifully how growing up, in these occult families is such a two-sided story, really, like two separate lives. And I think that's something that all survivors can relate to.
Definitely. And it's so interesting because not everyone thinks of the two kingdoms that work in this world, darkness and light, as kingdoms that mix so much and provide so much gray. You would assume that you would look at something and be able to say, well, that's evil or that's dark. But in my case, you actually couldn't, because I was born into and raised in this world that lived a duality. It was a complete dual life. I had one foot in the kingdom of darkness and one foot in the kingdom of light. And I grew up completely thinking that I was a church girl.
Yeah.
I was God's girl. I knew him. I worshiped him. I loved him. And I didn't realize that on the other side of the coin, basically turn the tables over, I was living in darkness and was an operative for Satan at the same time. And I realized during my journey that this was intentional from the enemy, because his greatest tool is to be able to take those who belong to God and turn them. And I believe that he does it as an offense to God. He's trying to give God a great big slap in the face almost, and be able to say, look who I took. And for me, it was that when I realized the duality and the duplicity that I lived in, I could see why the enemy did that. And that's why it's such a victory. It's actually such an easy thing, in a sense, for God to pull me back, because I never belonged to the enemy. I mean, he can't create anything. I firmly believe that he's just one of the created beings, right? That's what the word tells us. He's a created being. And so he can't make anything. He can only take what is created and turn it and twist it and destroy it. And that is what he tries to do. But for me, I felt my whole life that God had his fingerprint on me, and that the blueprint of who he created me to be was there the whole time. And so it was just a question of God's timing before he was able to pull me out. And really what he did was he uncovered the truth of who I was, which was already there. The enemy can't actually destroy who God created you to be. He can simply try and make a fake, really. And in the story of coming into revelation, it's part of my journey even of writing, which was that I discovered writing in my teens. And I loved it. And I thought I simply loved it as an escape. I thought I was, my solitude time, and I was running away from things, and I didn't know how to relate too well to people. So I was a loner, and I realized that's not uncommon. But I turned to writing, and in the writing, I didn't realize my brokenness, but all of my fragmented dissociative parts that were already there and had been there since the womb and childhood, they actually found a release through my pen, and they started to write to me about what I had been living in the dark that I was unaware of. And so it was quite the unique tool to realize that I was writing poetry and I was writing all these creative writing things. And as I would look at it, literally, as I was writing it, I'd look at it and go, I don't know what this is talking about. And it would start to leak through to me. And I started to realize there's more going on here in my life than I realize. And it was my second book, The Truth Leaks, is literally about how God can give us a tool to break us apart because he needs to put us back together. And for me, it was that. I didn't know that the normal life that I was living in the light on the outside was not the truth. And so he had to unravel me. He had to break it apart and basically let the floodwaters flow so that I could find the path to healing and freedom. And he completely did. I mean, he set up a road ahead of me and people ahead of me that I could never make possible. Like, it was an impossible. And yet he did that because he knew that I was his and that I had said yes to him. As much of me had said yes to him as I could, that he knew how to find me when the time is right. And that's the interesting thing about the darkness, right? The word says darkness is light to him. There is nothing that can hide us from God. God is there in everything. And that's the amazing part of the journey, is being able to walk it out with him. Deliverance and freedom and wholeness is like he's taking us back to our original. And I love the fact that he is the one who made us, so he's the only one who can take us back to original. And that was the biggest part of my journey, is I wanted authenticity. I had lived with so much lies that I wanted authenticity. And to give you a little snippet of just what my life looked like, I was born into the occult and raised in the occult, but I was born from two biological parents that I don't remember, and placed in a family that was not biologically related to me, and they raised me as their own. So I fully believed for the first 15 years of my life that I belonged to my parents and that I was a sister to my two brothers, and we lived an absolutely atypical, completely normal Christian life. I was homeschooled, we went to church, we didn't move around, we didn't have a lot of friends, which I now look back and realize was maybe a bit of an oddity.
Yeah.
But we honestly looked completely normal. And part of the enemy's scheme in my life was to make me undetectable. So he wanted me to look absolutely perfect on the outside and to have no one be able to see that anything was going on under the surface. And it's so interesting to me because, again, you said it at the beginning here, Gabby, that, we don't talk about the darkness to give it any credit. We don't talk about things that are evil to bring them into the light simply for the sake of exposing them. That actually, I fully believe it actually strips darkness of its power when we expose it, to give glory to God and to give Jesus the credit, because the enemy does not deserve any credit. My first 20 years was lived with these two worlds coinciding. I lived in light in the daytime and I lived in the dark at night. And for those first 20 years, I could honestly say that the enemy owned me and he ruled in my life. But once God set me free, after that first 20 years, I honestly go, no, the enemy didn't actually own me at all. I was living under his thumb. He had control because he had broken me apart by all the trauma to a couple of thousand parts. I'm not going to lie, I had a couple thousand parts that were broken and fragmented, and he had control over almost all of them, but he didn't own them. And so as soon as Jesus stepped into the picture and actually called them forth as the pieces of me that he had made, the enemy completely lost his hold. I'm not going to lie that it wasn't a battle. It was a battle. It was a big war for my life. But it truly, when we talk about our testimonies, right, and we talk about the things that God has done, it actually takes the power away from the enemy. And that is something that I absolutely live for, because there's nothing better than giving Jesus the glory and the credit for us as his daughters, as his kids, right? So the story of my life was, yes, that I knew something was wrong in my teens. I couldn't put a finger on exactly what it was, but I had asked God to bring truth and revelation to me, and whatever I was involved in to lead me out. And when I was 21, he did that. He set up a couple ahead of me that would become my spiritual parents and would walk through the entire journey with me. And they're still in my life. 21 years later, they are still in my life as my spiritual parents. And they are still those people to me who will stick with me through thick and thin and have seen everything and still love me completely unconditionally. And that was an absolute miracle. I came from being in college and not knowing which way to go to having two strangers offer me a road to freedom. And that was, it felt like God had thrown me an absolute lifeline. And I didn't trust them, but I said, yes, I can't live in this any longer. And so I came to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, which is where I am now. And I walked through the healing and the deliverance and the freedom that I needed to. And then since then, God has just kept unraveling the truth of who I am. He has refounded me in my proper foundations. He's given me a new name completely. He's given me a new family. He has walked me out of everything. And now I get to talk about it, which is the most amazing thing.
Oh, praise God. I just love hearing that, it's an absolute miracle that people like us have been able to escape from the enemy's kingdom. And there's no other explanation, that for it, then, you know, God really moved miracles to take those obstacles out and get us out. And, you know, just, you know, reflecting on what you were saying before, Rachel, you know, it is just all lies, it's all tricks. You know, the enemy really puts this overlay, you know, over God's creation, of programming, of lies, of, you know, all of this misconception, and it enslaves us. It's spiritual bondage, and God has to break all that off to set us free. It's just such a beautiful story, and this incredible couple throwing you a lifeline, being led by God. I would love to ask, you know, did you find out later that they perhaps saw some signs and knew a little bit about potentially what you were going through, about that you were coming out of the cult? Did they sort of clue onto it before you even knew? And I would also love to ask, you know, about a little bit more about your deliverance journey, like what that was like as well.
For sure. I think this couple, in all honesty, they had met one person like me just about a year or so before they met me. And it was right when God was asking them actually to give up their jobs full time and to go into full-time ministry. And they didn't know what it would look like. But they had met this one other lady before me, and they had started into the journey with her. And in that journey for them, God had told them very distinctly, and this is the most profound thing I remember hearing from them. He told them, don't go looking into the occult. Don't go looking into things. Don't look into books. Don't read other things. Just trust me. I will give you everything that you need, and I will be the voice that guides you. And so they had no background on this, but they did know this one other person, and they walked her through a journey similar to mine before they met me. So when I came into their life, it was that I had gone actually to a Christian psychologist here in the city looking for help. And she had said I was way beyond her, that she dealt with multiplicity, she dealt with dissociative identity disorder, but the layers of demonic and the layers that come with the occult, she said, I don't know how to deal with this, but I know this couple that just started ministry. Do you want to meet them? And so that was the introduction, quite literally. And I was referred to them because they had just started into doing healing and deliverance ministry. And so they knew when they met me, they told me that they remember me walking up the sidewalk, and they just knew a little bit of what they were dealing with. They did not know the full story, though. And the most amazing thing about my journey, and even how God calls us his own, and he calls us by the name that he gives us, is very key, because I realized that I grew up under a different name, and I grew up under a name that I was given. And it had a lot of things attached to it. And there was a lot that was put on me because of it. And people don't realize, I think, sometimes the significance of the names that we're given, especially when they're given either in the dark or in the light. And so this couple, actually, before I even came to them, they knew of me. I had not said yes. They found themselves praying for me almost every night. And they were praying and calling for me by my other name, the one that they knew. And Holy Spirit stopped them one night in the middle of their prayers and said, don't call for her, call for Rachel. And that night I picked up the phone and I said, I will come and stay with you.
Oh, wow.
So the power of being called by your true name can break through anything. And that was the biggest prison door open for me, was somehow them calling me by my name in the heavenlies in prayer. I heard it. It was like all of me heard it. And all of a sudden I could answer, and I could take them up on this offer of freedom. And I did. I came and lived with them. So they knew a little bit for sure about what they were getting into. They didn't know all of it, and it was a battle, and they literally stuck with me through everything, because the father that I grew up with actually came down to meet with them and the church that they were in, the leadership team, and he turned everyone against them. And the church actually asked them to drop me, that I was going to be too much. And they said no. And
Oh
they said,
my
"No,
God.
God asked us to walk her through this, and we are going to walk her through this." And I think their willingness, honestly, I think their willingness was what became a vessel that God used to work through so mightily, because they weren't relying on what they knew. And they weren't relying on their history or their experience with people like me. They were literally relying on Holy Spirit to tell them what to do next and where to go, and to break through the smoke and give truth and revelation. And they trusted him that much that they could say yes to somebody like me. And I was complicated. I'm not gonna lie.
We all are.
I was a mess. When it all started to unravel, I was just, I mean, I was somebody who on the outside was literally the perfect daughter, and it was such a facade. Like that was the control, that was the programming, that was what the role that I had to be. I couldn't step outside of it. And so when I came to them, I was basically robotic. That's the best word I could use to describe me. I was a robotic Christian who knew how to say the right thing at the right time. I was the proverbial chameleon who could fit into every situation with anything that was needed, but none of it was real. Like I was not me. And so they saw through all of that, and they were able to walk me through. I actually went through 12 very intense deliverance sessions with them. And to give you a timeline, it was because I was at college in California, and I was in my summertime sabbatical, and I came to live with them in July, and I was going back in September. And so God knew that they had these 2 months with me, and he knew my timeline. And so we had 12 deliverance sessions where several other intercessor ladies would join them and me. And everything that was very major or big, they asked God to confirm to one or two other people. It was never just something that I accepted on my own, because there was a lot of lies coming from me. Always, right? Everything coming out of me, I didn't know what to believe. And so they
Programming.
asked Holy Spirit, right? And so they were 12 sessions, and they were very intense, and they were just, and I call it an epic battle. Like my life was just the storybook battlefield at that time. The enemy did not want to let go. There was a lot of very strong parts in me, guardian parts, who were just absolutely resistant. And it was so interesting because the thing that Holy Spirit asked this couple to do was, just every session was to literally ask Jesus to go in and find whatever part he needed to meet with that day. And they were always very key parts. But it was the first time in their life that they came out and they presented, and it was beyond their control. They didn't know why they were there. And if anyone knows anything about the kingdom of darkness in the occult world and how brokenness and fragmentation works, usually parts in the occult are only queued up for rituals or for things of darkness, and they're triggered and they're called out, and they kind of know what that's about. And so all of a sudden there would be this part there in the room saying, I just got pulled out by somebody else. Why am I here? And it was Jesus. Jesus knew who to go to every time. He knew who to go to. And it was amazing, because what happened was, I think he went to 12 very key parts who had to let go of their assignments and their programming, and had to be delivered of all the demonic. And then that was enough to break apart the rest of my whole system, just to be able to find freedom and healing. And so it was 12 intense sessions that opened my prison door and set me on the path to freedom. And then the next probably 10 to 15 years was walking it out. Because all of it doesn't happen in deliverance. And I definitely realized that deliverance was what opened the door to my prison, but I was the one who had to choose to walk through it. And if I chose to walk through each door that succeeded it, I would move more and more into wholeness, and I would move more and more into my identity. And so I call myself a yes girl. I had said yes to God from my childhood, and somehow in the course of all of this, I continued to say yes. And he was faithful in just leading me through every step of what came after deliverance, because that was actually the harder part.
Definitely.
And that sounds weird to say, but deliverance is so outside of ourselves almost. And it's like this power struggle between literally darkness and light, and we're stuck in the middle and we're being pulled, but we almost have no control in those moments. And when God gives us back our voice and our authority, and we take those moments back from the enemy, and we're able to say no and cut chains and walk away, the after part is the unknown, and it's harder. And the unknown is always where a lot of people, I think, get stuck. And it's what breaks my heart, because the unknown is the free fall into trust. And either we trust him with our lives or we don't. But the interesting thing about trust is that it's almost unfounded. When we start to go into these unknown places with God, we have no idea what we're going to face. And honestly, the hardest thing to face sometimes is ourselves. And it was really hard to face all the unknown about myself. So when he started to give truth and revelation about who I was, that my family wasn't my family, that I had been living in this for this long, that I was that broken, it's hard to walk forward almost with blinders on, just holding someone's hand and say, truly, I trust where you're leading me, because I don't know. So that part, the after part, was probably harder, but it was sweeter as well. It's just, I can only describe it as I was finally able, after deliverance, to step into the skin that I always should have had, but never lived in. And it was like I was able to go back to the me I was supposed to be. So even though I felt very abnormal, I felt weird, I felt not myself, but at the same time, it was like I was more myself than I'd ever been. And it's this amazing almost contradiction that only God can do, to bring you back to who you truly are and finally show yourself your real face in the mirror and be like, I know who that is. For the first time in my life, I recognize that person. And brokenness just makes you unrecognizable, right? Even to yourself. Yeah. And so I don't know if that answered those two questions.
Brilliant. Thank you so
I
much.
can talk very easily.
I love when you talk. You just share so much from the heart. So thank you. And yeah, it's just such a beautiful story, like to start with this couple, just modeling that obedience to God, that trust, and I think that's so important for us as survivors, because we've grown up in families where everything's based on lies. It's all a hierarchy. Everyone's just serving the person above so they don't get hurt, or someone else doesn't get hurt, so there's no trust, there's no safety. But that would have been so beautiful and such, an opening, into God's kingdom, to see this couple modeling, not just talking about or reading the Bible or the gospel, but actually modeling what it is to be in obedience to God, to trust his messages. And, look at the result. Like, they literally brought you out and supported you on your journey. And yeah, just your comments about finding your identity again. I think, all survivors can definitely feel that in their own lives. It's such an indescribable sensation of being broken down, breaking off all of this programming, all of these demonics, everything, all the lies, and actually feeling, wow, I've never been here before, but this is what God's will was for my life. Like, it's so beautiful, but it's so different as well.
It's so different, because you step out of what you know and are familiar with. And it's amazing how familiarity can actually become comfortable even when it's pain. And that to me was such a profound revelation, even in the healing journey. If I allow myself to become too familiar with where I am and I'm comfortable, even there you can't grow, even if it's in the light. But in the dark, oh my goodness, in the dark, it was just, you never felt like you belonged, and yet you felt like you were in this place of familiar and comfort. And when all of that was gone and I was in an unfamiliar place, I actually came home.
Mm.
And it's so interesting because I realize in doing this for us, Jesus and God's heart is actually to call us home, because it's not only to himself, it's to ourselves. He wants to take us home to who he made us be. He doesn't want to leave us in a broken state, in a place that we don't belong. He actually wants us home. And I remember feeling in my most uncomfortable moments of healing that I was finally home. And it is an indescribable feeling.
Really is. And I think, after living through the trauma, and, God is only showing us the traumas and, the things that we need to know to heal. There'd be so much more for all of us that, hopefully we will never know. It's not needed. Do you know what I mean? But each time we process and integrate and, are delivered from that trauma, we're coming more back into our bodies, and Jesus is facilitating that. And I know so many survivors I speak to, it's like, you actually feel presence. Like, I've never
Yes.
felt this in my body before, like
Yes.
I'm not halfway hanging out over here or dissociated over here.
Yes.
It's like, this is what God made us to be, like completely here, standing in his truth and able to help others and show the way forward. So it is a beautiful feeling and so different. And I think you really explained, that sensation and feeling of deliverance so well, that it's like these prayers and, these incredible believers in God are able to break off these spiritual structures, this spiritual programming around us. And that's wonderful, because that's what was enslaving us and keeping these programmings running. But after that's out, it's kind of like, okay, what next? And it's a daily choice. It's a daily choice to face the challenge of choosing life and not choosing the death and the pain and the enslavement that we knew. And it's very easy for us all to get stuck at times. It's easy to live with the devils, because they're all we've known. And it takes that daily challenge of, Jesus, show me the strongholds that are still left. Jesus, show me, where am I still stuck? Where am I still stuck in a life from the enemy's kingdom? And, it takes courage, to face some of these things. Like, no, not another thing that's being taken away. But it feels so good afterwards. But, it's going through that. Am I ready to give up everything that I know?
Yeah.
To take back God's will for my life.
It is.
And I keep saying yes. I keep saying yes, no matter how hard it is, just hold on to whatever you have and keep going forward, because he's got us.
Yeah, he definitely does. And he knows how important choice is for us, right? This was the most precious gift I think that God gave me when I came into deliverance and healing, was giving me back choice, because it's something that the enemy doesn't, right? There is no choice, even in the midst of the face of, there will always be these two options. But in that, there is actually no choice. And a lot of people will probably know what I'm talking about by that, where the enemy is always presenting us with false sense of choice so that we feel like we are able to make a decision. And in the end, you realize none of that was my choice, right? And so coming into deliverance and having the recognition of how much authority we have over ourselves, the enemy tries to take that away entirely, because he knows how much authority we have over ourselves. That's God-given authority, and it's something he can't really touch, but he can cover it over, and he can try to have it disappear. And so choice to me was such a precious gift that God gave me back, in realizing, yes, it was my decision whether I walked forward with more healing. It was my decision whether or not I embraced new foundations and let old ones crumble. Like, all of that was such a precious gift, because I'd never had choice before. Oh, and it is the most amazing feeling. No matter how hard the things we do choose to walk through are, they will never be as painful as not having a choice. And God gives us that because he knows that, well, first of all, he wants us to choose him and to love him freely, but he knows that that is the complete opposite of how the enemy works. And so when it's offered to us, it's literally like this amazing lifeline. We get this breath of fresh air that we've never had before, and we go, oh, I can do that. It's like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And I remember literally feeling God's delight over me as I would make choices in my life moving forward. And I would see him smiling down on me, and it still makes me cry. Just
Definitely.
realizing that it's Papa, right? It's Papa God going, that's my girl. And
So,
he's just so happy. He's literally so happy that we move forward into the things he has for us with our free will.
absolutely. And he knows how hard it is at times for us as well. Like he knows our hearts. He knows every struggle. He knows where we've been even more than we have, because we've forgotten a lot of it as well. So, he's seen exactly what we've been through and been there through all of that as well. And, it's so true, just having that for the first time, it's like having a father you can trust. For so many of us, our homes weren't safe.
Yes.
A father was potentially an abuser, a handler, a programmer. So it's so hard for survivors to trust again, but he's so gentle with us too. It's always a choice. And he's fighting, his whole army is fighting so hard to bring us back. Like when you see them come in and take out, witchcraft attacks, demonics for us, like they do all of that. And all he asks us to do is, hold on, keep saying yes, just keep moving forward. And I think as survivors, we get caught up in like, it's not moving fast enough because we've missed out on so much time as well. It's like, oh, wow, I've only just remembered now. Like, I've lost 40 years. I need to get through this really fast,
It's
God
true. And
doesn't
it's
matter.
easy. It's easy to see it as loss. And for a long time, I think I did actually see that life in the dark was lost time. But it's so amazing because he's called the Redeemer and the Restorer for a reason, because he knows actually how to redeem and restore everything that's lost back to us. And it's amazing how he does that. I don't actually look at my life in the dark now as time before God or time before me or time before my purpose. I actually see it as this is what he allowed me to walk through so that I could be here today.
Yeah.
And so none of it is actually wasted. None of it's lost.
That's it.
And that's restoration.
I love that. And it's like, as much as the enemy tried to take, our gifts from God and corrupt them and use them in his kingdom, God, through healing us, shows that, we have the knowledge now to expose this kingdom, which we are doing. We understand and we can raise awareness and solutions, but, it's his healing. He brings back, his God-given gifts for us. And there's so much more than the enemy could have even thought of using them for in his evilness as well. I would love to ask you to share just a little on, I mean, you're a passionate writer. I know you're like me as a child. You grabbed every book, and like we were chatting a little bit before we come on just about how great books were. They were like this incredible escape from tough times growing up. But you're the way you've like love words and you've used your writing skill. I speak a lot, in our community about using journaling. So, around your prayer and, always having something there, like having some paper to write down what's coming up for you. And I've found journaling and writing, even writing articles about healing and different areas of the network, really healing for me, because it's allowing me to express myself as well as give a solution. I would love for you to share a little bit, maybe about your practices with journaling and how it was writing your book, because I imagine that would have been an incredibly, probably challenging, but also healing experience as well.
Oh my goodness. Every book is different, and every journey through writing a book is incredible. And now that I have two and have that comparison, it's really amazing to be able to share it. But my love of words was definitely that words could say something, especially words on paper. that I wasn't allowed to say. And so, like you said, it's a release and it's an expression. When you feel stuck and you feel like you are imprisoned, I think we all need an outlet. And I think God gives us all an outlet. And I know everyone is creative in some way. And it might not be as an artist painting or as, a writer writing, but he gives us something because he knows we need to be able to let what's inside come out. Otherwise it just gets stuck there and becomes a poison almost. And so words for me were how to express what I was feeling when no one was listening. And it felt to me, especially in journaling, that was the place where I was talking to God. And in that place, I could say anything and it would be accepted. And I think we all need that place, whether it's in words or song or whatever it might be. We need to know that he is actually bending his ear to us every moment of every day. And he wants to know the pain that we're in, and he wants to have the tears fall so he can catch them. And he wants to be able to be with us in those moments. And for me, words were that tool. He had given me this love of them, and then they became a tool, and he used it and he wove some amazing things through words for me. And so it's funny because my first book is the Becoming Rachel book. So this is my story. This is the timeline that tells the whole journey, right from kind of my childhood and how I became Rachel, and on into healing. And then even right up until the last couple of years, it has, he's always doing things for us. He's always uncovering more because, my goodness, we are complex creatures and we are in layers, and he knows exactly how to peel off layer by layer by layer. And so this book was actually just written 2 years ago. This is new. I knew right at my deliverance. I was delivered in 2002, which is amazing to say because that's 12 years ago now. But I knew that I would one day write my story, and I didn't know when. And it was always kind of simmering in the background. And every time I would sit down to start to write, I had nothing. And as someone who loved words, that was frustrating. So frustrating that I'm like, God, I have this amazing story. You have done some incredible things. And I sit down and I'm like, what's the title going to be? What am I going to write about? And I get nothing. And it was so annoying, but I would just put it aside and go, okay, it's your timing, obviously. And I had some ideas of different ways that I might write it. I thought, well, maybe it'll be a children's book and it'll be done in like fairy tale style. I was like, that would be really cool. But no, it was so interesting. I just kept living and kept going forward. And then when COVID hit, I work in events, and events ended here. And I was like, I'm going to take a year off, and I'm going to just be a housewife. And I was like, I'm so looking forward to some downtime. And I took about 2 months where I cooked and I walked and I got groceries, and I literally lived the atypical housewife life, and I loved it. And then one day I just felt him say, it's time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, like you, my life was in journals, and I went back and I pulled out all my journals, and I was looking through, and I went, oh my goodness, this is going to be an interesting task to go back through all these. But I just kind of started going back through the journals, and I started just pulling out pieces of like key moments that he was highlighting for me through my story. And then I just put down an outline. What am I going to talk about? I want to talk about the occult. I want to talk about my family. I want to talk about what dissociation is, right? What are parts? And then I want to talk about what deliverance looks like. And then what about healing? And I just I had this outline, and I am not kidding. And this is such a funny thing when it's God's timing. Oh my goodness. You can't ignore it. I would just sit down with my computer and I would pick one of those topics and I would just start writing, and it just flowed.
It was time.
And it was time. And the process of writing it was, I didn't write it in sequence from start to finish. I would just jump wherever I felt to in the moment. And there were days that I would write for 5 or 6 hours until my legs went numb and I was sitting on the couch and I was like, I need to stand up. And I would just, it was furious. It was like the words were just coming in a fury. And there were days when I would write about really hard things and I would weep, and it would be 20 minutes of writing and 2 hours of crying, and that would be it for the day. And I wrote the whole thing of the whole Becoming Rachel in about 5 months. And I was like, that was easy, God. Like, I know that you said I would write it and it would be your timing, but I literally, when it was done, I just went, that was so easy. And it's amazing because he actually did so many things for me in the writing of the book. And because I am such a lover of words, I actually edited out an entire book's worth. I edited out 45,000 words before this became what it is. And I went, wow, that would have been a whole lot longer, but I went through it. I was done, and I felt to go through it with Holy Spirit about 3 times. Just sentence by sentence, I asked him, do you want this in? Do I need to change this? And he would tweak things, and he took things out, and he didn't have me say certain things, because the main focus of my book is I want people to know that God sees everyone in darkness and can bring them out. But I don't give any credit to the enemy in this book at all. I don't give any credit to him, and I don't point any fingers. And I felt like God was being very, very specific in this. It's like, if I was somebody trapped in darkness and I was made to do unspeakable things, then how can I point a finger at someone else who has done unspeakable things to me, because I don't know where they are at, and God will have to be the one to judge. And so I purposefully keep, my names are not real names in it. The place I grew up is not listed in it. I don't want to accuse any location of being a dark place, because the world of evil is everywhere. It does not have a pin drop in a graphical location, a geographical location. So he went through it very, very carefully with me, and I had 3 amazing proofreaders that read it, and I got feedback from all of them on all the same things. So I took things to heart, and I wanted to listen to them with humility and with wisdom. And the end product, I am 110% happy with, because I know that it's his story and I got the honor of writing it. But because I was able to even write it, I feel like it actually made it real for the first time in my life. Putting it down into words made it real like nothing else ever did. I found myself rereading sentences and going, that is my life. And an acknowledgement and a recognition of it finally hit me, but only when I wrote it, not when I walked through it, only when I wrote it. So that is a testament to the power of words and to what he gives us that way, for sure. And it's interesting because this one tells the story, and I love it. This one's super personal. But even though it tells my story, I always tell people I feel like this book was for others. Like, this book is meant to go out, and it's meant to be something that is telling the bigness of God to others. And then when I wrote Truth Leaks, which is the second one, this is the full collection of all the poems that I wrote as a teen that started everything leaking through. And I felt like I wanted to put this out. And there's writing throughout here as well. But when I finished this, I realized I wrote this one for me. And that's a funny thing to say, because you always write a book for your reader. And it's true. But because this actually contains all the pain, this one has been the one that has actually ministered to me. I'm reading through it as a reader, and it's wrecking me, because I'm finally able to connect to the reality of the pain of my life. And this is the most recent journey that God's had me on, is giving voice to the suffering. And it's not something that's easily done. And this book, I believe, speaks to broken people. This one speaks to the depths of those who need freedom, and they need to be able to let what's inside them out. And so this one I literally wrote and I actually dedicated it to my own parts. I felt like I needed to say, this is my dedication. It says, to the many broken and dissociative parts of me who used my pen to communicate, thank you for being brave. So this is the heart behind this second book, is I want to be able to call the deep waters out of people.
Yeah.
And this book is my own journey, but I believe again that God uses words to be able to stir the waters for healing. And so that's what the second one is about. And the process between the two was night and day. It's so interesting, even in how easy this one was and how fast it came, and how he just put it all together. I kind of just almost threw up my hands and went, wow, God, like you did it. That was simple. And then in this one, I had the poems already written, and the process of putting it together into a book and putting what I wanted to write in between them, I actually got really stuck. And it was interesting because I didn't realize I wasn't fully connected to it all yet. And that's what God used to connect me to the pain. And once that released, I was able to write this, put it all together and release it saying, yes, like this is my heart. This is the depths of my heart. And I want to be able to put that out there to people to be able to say, you can too, right? You can too. This is a book for the brokenness.
So beautiful, just the emotional healing, in both, but especially your second book. And, we live in a world where it's so normalized to shut down your emotions, to numb them, to have a socially acceptable addiction or pretend nothing's wrong. That's definitely encouraged. And, for survivors, it's such a journey. And I'm still in that process, like there'll be the shock and the tears and the grief over a memory. And then 6 months later, a year later, it's like, oh, what about this emotion that was in there? And it's like, oh, well, that's so much worse than actually just seeing what happened, to feel that betrayal or that abandonment or, all of those really deep soul wounds, and we've been in such a cycle of surviving, we haven't been able to stop, for a lifetime from running from the enemy, and Jesus is giving us his space now to say, okay, it's okay now, you're safe to unpack those emotions. Like they have to heal.
They have to
We have
heal.
to, I feel like I shoved so many emotions so far down to just get by and to protect the people I needed to around me, because they were, struggling and breaking as well. And it's like, yeah, I'll get through it. I think survivors have this, like, I'll get through it, we can do it. But, that's fine, we can, and that's amazing. But at the other side, there's got to be the healing, like all of that, all of that emotion we've swallowed down and pushed down, it has to come out. And our Father gives us that space. And I love your vulnerability and, sharing what it was to put that book together, because, we have to make it okay. We have to make it this space where we can come forward and talk about our hurts, about the pain and the healing, because that comes from it, and society as a whole has just said, we're just going to put it under the rug. And I say no to that. That's not what Jesus did. He would sit there and weep with people when someone passed.
Oh my goodness. The journey he's had me on this last year has probably been one of the most deep in terms of this, because he asked me to embrace my pain and to go to the suffering. And he said, in this, he told me that I would come to know him, right, as the man of sorrows and as the suffering king, not just the victorious king. And he told me that I needed to be able to embrace the pain of my life, or else the victory isn't a full picture. And I didn't know what that would really mean, but the most profound thing that I have found from all of this is that every place that he took me of deep pain was actually so he could show me how he feels about it. And that wrecked me. So I saw the wailing Jesus. I saw the weeping Jesus. I saw the rage-filled Jesus looking at injustice. And when you catch a glimpse of him like that in the midst of your pain, because he knows it when it happens, but he actually gladly goes through it again with us when we choose to heal. But when you can see the depth of what he feels about it, there is something about sharing in suffering that was a key that I didn't realize until recently. And he has absolutely undone me for
Wow.
what he feels for us. And it gives us the ability to feel it for ourselves. And that was profound to me. Before, I didn't think I could handle the depth of my emotion, and I probably couldn't. But when he shows me how he feels about it and how he shares in it with me, and the depth, the raw depth of what he actually feels for what's happened to us, it literally puts a fire in our spine that lets us go, okay, I can, right? I've seen that. You are with me, you're in it, and you are my strength, so I can. And it has just been the most profound journey. Honestly, I think I've avoided this for most of my life, being able to recognize and acknowledge my emotions. And now that I have, I realize this complete picture that he was trying to give me. It's like now I am fully me. Because like you said, if you shove it down, you're actually missing a piece of yourself.
You're not being
And
authentic.
you're not being fully you, right? And so, oh, he's so amazing. And he knows exactly when, because I thought I would deal with emotions much sooner. And I didn't realize that he, in his perfect love and his grace and his compassion, actually knows the exact time of when I'm ready. Because at the start of this journey, when he said, it's time to acknowledge your pain, he said, because you are whole enough now and complete enough now to be able to handle it.
So beautiful. It's
And
such
he
a
knows.
beautiful testimony. And I think it's so needed as well, Rachel, because, I find, and this is not just for survivors, because we've all been wounded by this world. It's so broken. A lot of people get stuck on, a lie of the enemy, and that is, that it's God's fault that this happened. And they get stuck in like, why would a good God let this happen to us? And, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but, Jesus has really guided me through this, because that was such a deep wound and a lie of my programming, because I went through SRA in the church, was that God couldn't save me. They would go to the extreme of, performing rituals where Jesus was shown to not save me. It wasn't the real Jesus. And it's very, very, very common for survivors, or they'll be telling you, where is your Jesus now? Where's God now? As they're doing horrible things. So it's very, very programmed into survivors to think, well, this God must be awful if he let this happen to me, and through the healing journey and Jesus sitting with me, and as I'm journaling and reading the Bible, he has brought back memories of how he was literally with me in some of the
Yes.
worst things. He was there holding my hand while I was being drowned. It was
Yes.
the most terrifying, traumatic things, to a young child. I knew I was never alone, and that for a lot of them, it was like the last seconds I have before I'm unconscious. It was like I knew that he was with me, so I could kind of let go almost. And I think it's for us to recognize that, God has given us free will, and that is the beauty of it. And unfortunately, in these occultic, cult groups, as children, especially under 12 years, when we're still completely under our parents' covering, what they choose to do to us is their free will. And God can try and support us and get us through that circumstance. And I've seen instances and heard from survivors where he has literally sent angels in and broken things in rituals, broken things in experiments, and sometimes the cult could see it, sometimes they couldn't, but the children could. So he does so much, but at the end of the day, we are under our parents, and we were put there for a reason by God. He knew the glory that we were going to walk in now. He knew that we would have to give testimony of everything that we saw, and that's what we're doing, today, Rachel. So I would love for you to hear, because I know it's something that survivors get so stuck on, like, I can't trust God. I can't go back to him. He's responsible for what I went through. So yeah, I'd love to hear your journey with that.
Oh my goodness, it's the biggest question I hear all the time. It's probably the biggest thing that is built into humanity, even, is to say, how can a good God let bad things happen?
Yeah.
And I get it. It's the most fundamental question, and it's probably not an easy one to answer, but I'll share what my answer is. And this is because this is what he has shown me. And it goes back to the beginning, right? He is a perfect, loving God, and he has all power and dominion, but he created man with free will for that very reason, that he wants us to choose him. And he knew that in giving us free will and giving us the tree of the knowledge of good and evil so that we could have free will, he would allow us to walk the other way. And so when it happened and we fell, right, and we gave a lot of that authority over to the enemy, he had the plan for salvation, but because of his rules and boundaries that he put in place, his hands are quite literally tied very often, and we don't always see that. Not that he can't, but that he won't step outside those boundaries that he put in place because it violates free will. So I recognize very often that God is an allowing God to a certain degree because he knows the end from the beginning. And he can see the justice and the vengeance that will come on the enemy. And he is able to allow it to happen now because he can see A from Z, he can see that big picture. And for my life, he has been able to show me, just like you, oh my goodness. It was like listening to myself when you said that.
I feel like that when I'm reading your book. I'm like, has she been watching me?
Is she kidding me? He completely understands. No, and this is what makes me realize we are so very similar, because the enemy can't do a lot that's very creative. So he's kind of stuck even by what strategies he for all of us. But it's so true that Jesus will actually take me back into memories and show me where he is with me in them. And if I'm screaming, he's screaming. If I'm crying, he's crying, right? When I look away, he's shown me that he never looks away. And so he actually knows the depth of our wounds deeper than we do, which is amazing, because dissociation gives you the ability to turn away from something, right? It's that survival tool that allows you to actually step back and not be present. And so the answer to that big question for me was that God has showed me that he allows the life that I lived in darkness to go as long as it did, because he saw how much I would overcome, and he saw the victory that I would have and the person that I would be, and he knew that I could. So again, it's like he has the ability to see that big picture. He knows that I have the strength to be able to walk it out. And so he once told me that he chose my birth father, who was a very evil man, to be my father. And I got very mad at him. And at God, I got very mad at God. And I said, how could you, literally, of all the people in the world, right? He has to choose two vessels to bring us into this world. I said, how could you choose someone who is that evil? And he said, I chose him because of your victory. And I was humbled. I was in my car at the time, and I started crying, and I went, oh, like I didn't see that coming, right? I see the evil happening, and I rail at God for not stepping in. And it's like God's going, oh, honey, I will, right? If you want me to, I will, but the time has to be right. And I realized even as a child, this was one of the most profound things that he ever told me. He couldn't rescue me as a child because as like you said, as a child under your parents' covering, if he had come into a ritual in the dead of night and plucked me out physically, where would he have put me?
Where do you go? Where is there in the world that's safe?
Where would I have gone? Right. And so he knew I needed the parents that would become my spiritual parents. He knew I needed a home. He knew I needed that safe place to go to. He had to set all of that up ahead of me. And looking back again, it's that thing of, it's true that we are all, when we come out of the occult, we are all angry at God to some degree.
Yeah.
And very often we are angry at a God that has been presented to us that is nothing like the God that he actually is. Like so often I realized in dealing with my emotions, I said, God, I am mad at you. I am mad at you for letting me live in this life for this long. I'm mad at you for allowing evil to be evil. And I said, I'm actually mad at you. I'm mad at you for the you that you're not. I was like, I'm mad at you because they told me that all of this is under your name, that you wanted me to do these things, that all of this is because this is your plan. And I said, so I am mad at a version of you that I was given, but that's not who you are. But I still had to be mad at him.
We had to
I still had to be
anger
mad at
out.
him.
All right.
I did.
He can take
Yeah.
it.
He can take it. He honestly, he's just like, bring it on, let it out to me. I know he's not wavering in his identity. He can handle what is thrown at him, and he knows exactly what has been done in his name that is slandering and is defamatory, because that's not what he is like. But that is what the enemy tries to do. Like you said, there's so many false Jesuses. There's so many times where you're presented with a version of God and told he didn't show up. He's not strong enough. He doesn't love you. And this is part of the unraveling of the lies for us, is to realize God actually comes and shows us exactly who he is in the midst of darkness. I remember when I was wrestling with this idea that a perfectly good God could be in the middle of evil. And he showed me it's because he can be in the middle of evil, but he's not part of it. So he is able as a good God to literally stand in the darkest places, but he's never a part of the darkness. And I was like, oh, that is a very good separation for me to realize and understand. He can be in those places. He can be raging mad in those places. He can be, like you said, the man of sorrows and crying and wailing with us in those places. But it's because he comes for us. He doesn't come to be part of the evil. And just being able to separate that was a huge thing for me in dealing with the emotions around God, was realizing the God I know is not the God that they represent. It's not the God that they pretend to show you, or the God that they want you to believe in. He's not. He's so much the opposite. Oh my goodness, he's so much the opposite. So that's the question of, how does a good God let bad things happen? It could probably be a whole book in and of itself, but for me for me, it was just realizing that he is there with us in pain because he knows the victory that can come. And also that his hands are tied in this age because of free will. But one day, all authority and dominion and rule will be given back to him. And so it's a strange mixture for me of that God is 100% powerful and also 100% full of restraint. And it's a strange combination to think of, but I have seen his anger at injustice, but he is also fully restrained because he knows the day has not come. Right? And it's interesting to think that for those of us who've walked out of darkness and bondage, we want justice more than anything. Right? We want safety in the world and we want justice. And I've realized that I don't care so much for justice in this world, but I am so looking forward to the day to having the front row seat on justice that is executed on the enemy. Because I don't know the people in this world that God actually will rain vengeance on, because I don't know the ones that are fully sold out to the enemy and the ones that will actually become free. So I can't look at the people that I would be angry at even and say that I'm ready for justice. I actually am just so ready for justice on the enemy because he's the one that deserves it. And he's the one who's going to get it fully.
Beautifully expressed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's such a realization, and I loved how you said about how God can exist in the midst of this evil, but be restrained as well. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we could never do. Like if we were there, we would be angry and we would destroy. If we got to that level of anger that you can see Jesus in at his most vulnerable, at his children being hurt, we would become the enemy ourselves. And that's exactly the saddest thing. Do you know what I mean? And he knows that. So it's just so beautifully expressed. And I think it's such a journey for for survivors, but for all of us, because this programming about survivors when they're very young get programming put in about, heaven and hell, like you're going to go to hell because of all these things we've made you do and what you've seen, etc. And that very much goes out into society as well at a different level. So, there's so many things pulling people and deceiving people and lying to people about the truth of God to keep them lost, to keep them stuck in the enemy's kingdom. And, as we finish up, I would just love to ask you, if there's survivors out there listening that are sort of, there's parts of them saying yes, they want to, but they're scared. They're like, oh, I don't know if I can trust this God. Like, what advice would you give them, through your journey of learning to walk with God again after escaping the enemy's kingdom?
Wow, that is such a great question. But yes, for those of you that are listening, no matter what time you're listening, the biggest piece of advice that I can say is if you want freedom and you want joy and you want to be fully alive in this world as you were created to be, Jesus will have a way for you. And from experience, I can tell you it's worth it. So in the hesitation and the fear, because yes, it's there. There's definitely fear. There's the unknown. There's all of that that's going to play into it. But I mean, I'm here as one who walked through hell and back again to be able to say it's worth it. He will make a way where there is no way. And he did that for me. He fought battles for me that I could never fight. I was incapable of fighting them, but he never loses. So he's the best person to fight our battles for us. So if you're willing to say yes to him, he has an incredible life for you on this side of eternity. And I would love for you to live it because I love my life now and I used to hate it and I love it now. My life right now on this side of eternity is the best, no matter what I'm going through. And that's because of him. It's because I said yes to him. So my best advice is saying yes to Jesus is absolutely worth it. And he will see you through everything and he will be with you every step of the way.
I love that. Thank you, Rachel. I
You're
think
welcome.
that is so the message, that God's had in my heart lately. And I feel like, you were an answer to my prayer coming across your work, because I was like, this girl, it's like my story. Like, she's really found, how simple it is. And, we're also guilty of overcomplicating things. I have looked for healing in all the wrong places during my life. I've looked in the New Age. I've looked in like all sorts of alternative healers. If it's out there, I've probably looked into it or tried it. And I can say in the last 5 months of doing, prayer work, of doing deliverance, of really journaling and asking, Jesus to come into my life and show me, what I need to heal, or show me the strongholds. It has just been like filling myself with this water that I've been thirsty for my whole life. And it was all about me being able to trust a true father. So I think it's such a beautiful journey for survivors, to have that spiritual family, and also to have the family of other believers all around the world, like, connecting with you today, Rachel. Like, it's so beautiful that as survivors we're on opposite sides of the world, but we can connect and, put this message together to assist other survivors in their healing. So
yeah, it's beautiful. I'm honored. I am very honored. Again, the door of our connecting opened because God opened it. I mean, how else do you
have done that?
You cannot make this kind of thing happen. And this is what makes me realize just how amazing he is at setting us up for the best, because he wants our best. And oh my goodness, he will stop at nothing to get us there. Yeah,
we have an amazing God fighting for us, against whatever obstacles, and I know the healing is hard. Sometimes it's the smallest thing, like facing, this intense fear, or being just like, oh, I have to face this emotion. And that can be, even more confronting than having gang stalking and that sort of thing, like the terror that is put into us in the programming. So there's so many layers of it, but God is with us. Like, God can really open doors where we thought there were none. So
and he can make the most complex things so simple. I know for me, I looked impossible. I was like, God, how are you going to unravel me? This is absolutely so complex. And he was just like, well, I know how you're made. So
He
I
made
can.
us.
I
He
can.
made us, so he's the
Yeah.
best person to put us back together, right? Like he knows exactly what he wanted, his will for our life, and he will break off everything of the enemy. It will take time. It's an ongoing walk. There's still little things I'm finding constantly, and I'm like, oh, get that out.
Oh
But
yeah.
the beauty of healing, it's a lifelong journey of like walking closer with God as well.
It is. It's so true. I used to think that it was a one and done kind of deal. Like, I will be delivered. I will walk through this door as an entirely new person. I will walk out into a new life and I will never look back. Well, it doesn't
Not
happen
quite.
that way. Oh, I was so wrong. And it's not about the goal of it or the destination of it, because he has so many treasures for us in the everyday steps as we move forward, that I'm like, oh, you know what? It doesn't matter if I bump up against something again tomorrow or the next day. He'll see me through, because in the journey, even, he's able to just show us his faithfulness, and he never changes. So it doesn't matter where we're going. It's just like, God, you will take me there. You're steadfast. Yeah.
Exactly. He's got all the answers that we need, and it's so
Eat
simple.
it.
So simple to just, find that personal relationship, this spiritual relationship with Jesus, and allow him to guide us in our healing. So I
Yeah.
love that. Would you be able
Yeah.
to let people know where they can find your books, if they would
Of
like to get hold of it?
course.
I have loved reading Rachel's book. I would highly recommend it for survivors and anyone. It's beautifully written.
Thank you. And you know what? It's funny, but I am actually in transition right now. So you were asking where to find them. Right now, I have physical copies of my book, and I am willing to mail them anywhere. My publisher is in transition and I have been released. So that means that the website that I currently have is no longer up, and there's no longer shipping available and that kind of thing. So I'm just in transition of looking for my next steps of how I can make my books available. But right now, the easiest thing is, if you are interested, just simply reach out to me. And so my email is very simple. It's rachelmckenziebooks@gmail.com. And my name is spelled Mckenzie with a CK, not an A. Um, and you can simply email me if you're interested. I'm also on social media. My hashtag is Rachel Mckenzie Books, so I'm findable on Facebook and Instagram. And that's where right now I put a lot of my words. So I try to post every day, just something of the journey he's given me, something about what he has for words. And I absolutely love that platform. But I love to connect as well. So if anyone is curious about the books, or curious about my story, or wants to ask me a question, please feel free to reach out online or through my email right now. And as soon as I have a website again with accessibility, or when my books are available on Amazon, I will let everyone know.
Oh, how awesome. Well, I just wanted to thank you for coming and sharing with us today. It's been a beautiful time. I could ask you so many more questions. We'll have to think about one coming up. So yeah, just thank you for all that you do. I just love, your courage and, sharing so vulnerably, the emotional healing journey that it is with, coming out of the enemy's kingdom. And I know that this will give so much hope to so many survivors. We have so many survivors at the moment that are just starting to remember, and really searching for, true healing after being misled for so long. So I really feel your story, and, the way you're sharing your gift with words, with the world, but, in particular with survivors of this horrible, childhood. You're giving people the solutions to really create a new life for themselves, in God's will. So thank you so much for all you do, Rachel. It's been a blessing having you join.
It was a joy, an absolute joy, and it's definitely my heart to be able to tell people that their father is calling them home. So
He is, and just say yes.
just say yes. He will do the rest.
I love it. God bless you,
Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you so much.